Hey, Manor House family, it is just so good to be with you again. I just want to let you know how much I love you. Just praying for you. This has been an absolutely crazy season. And we just want to let you know just how much we love you and appreciate you. And so I just stop and I think, wow, what a week it has been. And you know, when you just stop and you just think about what's going on in our world today, the Bible teaches us that when someone weeps, in our family, that we're supposed to weep with that person. When someone hurts, that we should hurt. And, Jesus teaches us a lot about this whole idea about being like Christ. And this is definitely one of those seasons where there's a lot of people that are just hurting, that are people that are wounded. And when we just stop and we just think about what's in front of us, the reality is that there's a horrific challenge that we're facing once again. It should have been dealt with a really long time ago with this whole issue of racism. And whether we like it or not, it really affects every single one of us. And when you stop and you just think about this senseless death of George Floyd, and it brings to the forefront this issue once again, and I want to say this carefully, it brings us to this place where we have a rare opportunity to deal with the senseless, systemic injustice that is just so demonic and really needs to be addressed. And I just want to let you know, Manor House family, that this is a really big deal for me. Listen, I understand the color of my skin, but my heart hurts. And I understand that this is a big deal for the world, for the nation, for the city. This is a big deal for our church family, especially because I know that there's people of color in our family right now that are wounded, that are hurting, they're filled with fear. And as a pastor, my heart breaks for that. And I think it's really important, and I wish I would have more of an opportunity even last week to make this statement, but I want to make it loud and clear so that the world can hear this from my heart, is that I personally denounce racism and white supremacy as a despicable, horrific, sinful act. And that's really what we feel as a leadership at Manor House, in case you're wondering. And it's been about 4 years. Eunice, I know you've been a part of the journey with us. We started a diversity team. And we've tried to do our part of training staff and trying to make changes. And I'm going to be the first to admit we could do better. In fact, we should do better. Let me say it a different way. We will do better. We must do better. But the bottom line is it's going to require every single one of us, Manor House family, to do our part to make sure that we make the change that's necessary. I do believe that we have this window. And if we just stop and we think about Manor House as a family, a church for the journey, God has allowed us 60 plus different nations to come together, all walks of life, different ages, different skin colors, different ethnicities, people of professions of all different kinds, government officials, law enforcement people, doctors, nurses, homemakers, children, youth. And he's put us all together. And he's asked us to figure out this issue because that's what he had in mind, that we would be one as him and the Father are one. And he knows if we can't figure it out in here as families with Jesus at the center, we're living in a hopeless situation. And so I understand, Manor House family, listen to me. This is a difficult, tough path that we're all on. I'm on, you're on. But God's given us the opportunity to figure this out. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to have an honest conversation. I'll be the first to admit, listen, guys, you would know this, you're my friends. I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to have all the answers. I sometimes don't know what to say. I feel completely inequipped to deal with the issues that are in front of me. But here's what I do know. I know how to love. I know how to cry. I know how to pray. I know how to believe the best in people. And I think that if we can posture ourselves as a church family with those things in mind, to allow each other to make mistakes and maybe sometimes not say the right thing at the right time and still believe the best in every person and love and pray and cry and just engage and connect, that we have a chance of really, really making a difference. So I want to jump into a conversation today. I'm just really calling this is that we want to have an honest conversation about race and reconciliation. And Manor House family, I have some of my dearest friends with me. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to be with me. Pastor J.W. Matt Hennessee, probably one of the greatest pastors that I've ever met. He's the senior pastor called Senior Servant at the Vancouver First Baptist Church, North Portland, historic church. You're not only one of the most amazing pastors I've met, great marketplace leader, great civic leader, doing so much in our city. And I just want to thank you for being with us. Thank you for speaking into my life. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for challenging me. Thank you for crying with me. Thank you for praying with me. I want to welcome you so much, and thank you for just spending some time with me today with our Manor House family. It's awesome.
Thank you so much, Pastor Marc. I'm absolutely, unequivocally grateful to be with you.
Yes.
Thank you as we come together today and to your family,
Yes.
who is my family now.
Yeah.
We want to just let you know it's a joy to be here.
Yeah.
I'm humbled and honored and grateful that you, as the pastor you are, care as much about making sure that we do something like this today. It's a joy, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
And I love your haircut. Let's go.
It is. We
As
go
a
to the same barber.
That's a prerequisite
So,
for the
yes.
conversation
There you
today.
There you go.
It's trending.
That's awesome. Pastor Keith Jenkins, man, I love you so much. Pastor of a great church, East Hill. You've been in the area for 3+ decades and have built some of the greatest multicultural churches in the Northwest. Man, when I grow up, I want to be like you someday. Thank you for modeling to us what it means to live in the middle. As you now pastor a multi-ethnic, multicultural church, I'm watching you, I'm learning from you. I'd follow you anywhere. Thank you so much for being such a great friend too, speaking into my life. Thank you for being with us today.
I appreciate you for being so kind. That introduction always makes me a little bit uncomfortable because anything that's been done has been done by the hand of the Lord, so we're grateful for it. But in particular, I'm grateful to be here with you and have this opportunity to come alongside of you as you lead Manor House into turbulent waters.
Yeah.
And let's just call it what it is. And so thank you for your courage to lead.
Yeah, love you, man. Eunice, Makinde, let's go. I just want to say this, Manor House family, she's no stranger to us. You happen to be one of the most wonderful, beautiful ladies that I've ever met. And I'm so grateful you're part of our family, at least for now, inside joke. And
everyone's going to ask questions now.
I know, they are, and that stays with us. This is a conversation, right? And I'm just so grateful. She attends our downtown campus. You've helped lead our diversity team. You're on the board, Portland Bible College, executive director for every child in Portland, Oregon. And you're so well respected, so well loved. Thank you so much for, again, being honest with me and speaking into my life and correcting me and praying with me and crying with me. And I want to thank you so much for just being with us today.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Asim Trent, one of my dearest friends, gave his life to Jesus here at Bible Temple, City Bible Church, Manor House. Went out, planted a church with the team in Denver, has come back, is now our downtown campus pastor with his beautiful wife, Lisa, doing a fabulous job. Thank you.
Love you, Pastor Marc.
Thank you so much for being with us.
So grateful for you and this church and everyone here. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah. Hey, so let's get to a conversation, a real conversation. I want to just pray. Ask everybody at home, bow your head, close your eyes. It's going to be a real short prayer because we've got a lot to talk about. Come on, Jesus, show up today. Lord, we're asking for every heart, every person listening today, Lord, that they could lay aside any hurt, any pain, any perspective, opinion, idea. Holy Spirit, would you speak to us? Lord, we're proclaiming today that we wouldn't be right, but we would be reconciled. God, would you bring us together? Your last prayer in the garden is that we would be one as you and the Father is one. So we thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen. So I want to just jump off the diving board into the deep end and just get right into it. And I would love to start with you, Pastor Matt. I want to ask you this question. What message did the knee on the neck of George Floyd send to you and the African community? Was this a race issue? And if so, why?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Number one, I do believe it's a race issue. I also believe it's a metaphor for what America, what this United States has really done to the African American community, or quite frankly, any community that is not white European. And I believe, especially as you look at the folks who are on the street, a number of them are very young. And part of what they're saying is America's knees been on our neck all these years as they look at it historically, and they are saying to some degree to those of us in this generation, you all and the peaceful way that you made everything come together, that's not good enough. And it's obvious it's not working, or that knee wouldn't be there. And if you think about that knee and the Colin Kaepernick knee, of which he got shredded for what he was doing, and all he was saying, come to yourself, America. This doesn't work. Let's come together and make these structures work for everybody.
Talk to me just a little bit about the personal emotion for you. You're watching the video. You're thinking about your whole life as a African-American man. What's going on right here? What emotion, what were you feeling personally?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Again, as an African-American male, a father, a grandfather, a spouse, a pastor, I looked at that and I hurt. And I hurt inside on the one hand because in 2020, we should not be doing this when I think about how old this country is. As a godson of Coretta Scott King, I look at this and say, think about all the things that Dr. King tried to do to avoid this. And to think about the fact that America had an opportunity to do this voluntarily in terms of making change. But as a result of its practices, nothing's changed. What did Dr. King say? We've come to Washington, 1963, to cash a check that came back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe there are insufficient funds in the great vault of opportunity of our nation, so we've come to cash this check. So truthfully, the response to the knee tells me that what we're doing is saying, guess what, folks? We're still coming to the Bank of Justice, and we still believe that it has plenty for all of us.
Pastor Keith.
Yeah, for me, you find yourself in these various roles within the community. It was very personal for me. My wife and I had an experience. So when we saw George Floyd in that position, my wife immediately became emotional because we were stopped by the LAPD through random, it was, obviously a mistaken identity. And I was actually out on the ground, spread eagle, in that fashion. My wife was still in the car, and she watched as an officer had his knee in between my shoulder blades, not on my neck. But that was reminiscent for us of a mistaken identity that if we don't know several law enforcement officers whom we love dearly in the LAPD that were in our church that happened to be on campus when I arrived, because this happened in our church parking lot in Los Angeles. We had bought a car, long story short, we had bought a car and the title had not been clean when we got it, had not been cleansed. So there was obviously a charge still pending. And the officer got on me, followed me several miles until we got to the church parking lot. And I noticed that he took up positions. And so the whole, guns drawn, police officers, that type of thing. The only thing that we began to say to ourselves is anybody can make a mistake, mistaken identity, okay. But what struck me that is reminiscent of what we saw is just the inhumane treatment. We, black and brown bodies, especially African American, have been fighting for our humanity, much less justice. Our humanity is in question. In the way that you see George Floyd treated, it is not as if that was a human being that had value for us, an image bearer, carrying the image of God. And so it struck a chord very deeply with us
Yeah,
as a family.
I so appreciate that. For me, it's I can't even imagine because I'm a white guy, and it's taken me almost to the age of 60 to even understand what white privilege really is, and it's so unfortunate that there are people today that have to experience that kind of feeling, emotion, thought every single day of their life. And as a church, Asim, you guys would be a part of this. We're a diverse church, but we're predominantly white as well, just because of the nature of our demographics. And I know you came in here, you've been apart for a while. What does it feel like for you? And again, maybe some of those that would be close to you, your friends of color, walking into this church, how's that different for you than me? Like when I walk in, it's just like, I don't even recognize my whiteness, And so when you walk in, what is it that you experience? The vibe, the feel, the people, what's that look like for you?
Man, a couple words come to mind. Actually, maybe a few words. One is uncomfortable, for sure, and in some ways comfortable, because that's my life. I've been in places and spaces where I'm just, when I walk into a room, I was telling someone on staff this. When I walk into a room, I automatically look, it's like a knee-jerk reaction. I look to see if people like me are in that room. And so you get comfortable with that. It's uncomfortable, but you get comfortable. And then there's just a level of distrust. Am I really going to be received here? And I'm thankful that I had people in my life that were leaders, that were people of color, that made me feel welcome, and they helped with that trust bridge that needed to be built.
Yeah.
And that's huge, And so also for me too, it's unique because even going back to the question to you guys about George Floyd, I've been in this own personal journey here at this church as a leader, as a father, as a human, as wrestling with who I am and my identity just as a person of color, and coming to realize there's African American blood flowing through me. There's Filipino blood. There's American Indian blood, but my skin is brown, and there's a level of, comfortability that I had with the friends and leaders that drew me into their circle to make me feel comfortable, and I'm drawn in that space to feel comfortable, and I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable around people of color. But to a certain point, and I've been feeling guilty, maybe that's not the word, but just wrestling with, I've been comfortable with people like me in their presence, but uncomfortable in their pain.
Yeah.
And there was a part of that I would just felt guilty, like, man, there's pain that it was like watching an open wound, and we were talking about that, Eunice. It's an open wound that sometimes we don't want to look at it, we don't want to acknowledge it, but it's there. And wrestling with the own wounds in my own life, and how can I be part of the solution and link arms with people of color in my life.
And here's the tragedy, and this is time to be vulnerable with the world. I've known you for decades, and I've never stopped to ask you the question, how do you feel? Which just shows me how real white privilege really is. And as I think about our audience and the people that are out there listening, I know this is, when we use the word honest conversation, this is as honest as it gets. Hopefully you feel uncomfortable as much as I do with the comments, because what it is it's the reality that we have to grapple with. And it's this issue that a lot of white people don't understand. I hear all the time, well, hey, I'm not a racist, but they don't understand what white privilege is. Eunice, you have done such a good job of communicating, I know in our private conversations, about this idea of white privilege. You've helped me to understand me. But maybe just talk about that for a second. Maybe help all of those that are listening. What is white privilege, and maybe what are some things that you'd even suggest, like that we could be doing?
Yeah, I mean, white privilege is such a complex thing to discuss. And I think on a basic level, to even get to the place of understanding what white privilege is, you have to come with humility to want to learn and understand. That's a word that I know in just the nature of the work that I do, that oftentimes people hear that word and they shut off completely.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think we have to start from a stature of understanding that when we're talking about race, point blank period, it's going to be uncomfortable. And if you're not willing to lean into that discomfort, there's no room for justice in that conversation. There's no room for empathy. There's no room for understanding. And so I think an example I would give, like, white privilege essentially is just this idea of, I mean, you have certain, I don't know, like, rights or abilities that I am not able to have. And as a Black woman, I think the basic example I can give of that is that I can walk into a store and there may not be hair products that are for me. I might have to travel to a different part of town to get those hair products. I remember there was a period of time in Portland where I had this foundation that I needed to find, and it was literally sold out in every single store. And probably because there was a lot of African-American women that use that same skin color, but as a white person, as a white female, you probably never have to think about where you're gonna find an item like that. Another example I think would be just when you think about inequality when it comes to housing or when it comes to neighborhoods you can live in. Right. I mean, even the simple fact that even when we're thinking about these issues on TV, that as a white person, you have the ability to disconnect. I can shut off my phone, you know, a white person can shut off their phone, go to bed at night, and not even have to think about that because there's nobody in their world or their life that's being affected by this issue. Yeah. I don't get to do that. Even if I turn off my computer, even if I shut off my phone, I still have to think about that because the moment I step out into the real world, there's that potential of being mistaken for somebody or someone else. And when you would ask that question, one of the things you would ask is when we're talking about white privilege in the context of what's happening right now in our nation, I would say there is so much news out there. Even just going on Instagram, I see people posting ways you can give back, ways you can help. And as I'm even thinking about that context, white privilege in the context of what is happening right now would be the ability to say that I am not going to tune into what's happening and I'm going to shut it out. The ability to say that I don't really need to care about what's going on because it doesn't affect me. And even as you're watching this, if you have even the urge and the ability to say, I can turn this off and not let this affect me, that's white privilege in and of itself, that it's not gonna affect you. You can end this conversation whatever you want and not even think about it ever again. And so what I would say in the idea of how you kind of get to a place of even just laying that down, that privilege down, I'm always reminded of the story of the Good Samaritan. And I think in that context of when we talk about race and our privilege, it costs us something.
Yes.
It costs us something. And even in that story, we see all these people that see this man on the street. And they knew it was going to cost them something, whether that was their moral status, whatever the case may be. And they chose that over helping somebody that was in need and that was unwounded. Yeah, and we see right now in our nation, there's so many people around us that we know, that we sit next to in the pews, that are wounded. And as a white person, you have the opportunity to say, I'm going to lean into that and enter into that space to get to know, or I can choose to just look at that wound and choose to just walk past it, to cross the street. Right. And we see the Samaritan, the unlikely of all of those people, that saw this man and saw a human being and saw the wound and saw the pain and decided, I'm going to lay down my privilege. I'm going to lay down what I know that society tells me is the way that I should behave and I should act. And I'm going to take this person in and I'm going to just do what I can to not just bless them, not just to be there with them in that pain, but to go far beyond that and do what's not even expected of me to make sure that I'm showing love to that person. And so I think in a biblical perspective, we need to be more like the Good Samaritan. But I also think just generally speaking, you have to educate yourself, surround yourself with people that are different from you. If you look at your circle and there's people that you see that they all look the same, that's a problem. You need to be okay with being uncomfortable. Yeah. It's never going to be easy. Right. I'm uncomfortable at times talking about race, and I'm a person of color, so I think that's something we just got to be okay with. And then also, like, engage civically in your community and in your neighborhood. Like, the churches have ways of getting involved. Step out of the four walls of your home. Step out of the four walls of the church and engage with your community. Educate yourself, learn, do that stuff, vote, whatever the case may be. All these things, it starts interpersonally with one-on-one, it goes locally, and then you can take that nationally. So that's what I would say is.
Well, Marc, one of the things that you know, our white brothers and sisters never have to think about, that I think about all the time, is I think about how much of me I can bring to a room. I think how much of me as an African-American male, like you've probably never given much thought your entire life, Marc, of saying, how white can I be today? Whereas though for us, going into meetings, going to the store, wherever we are, it's like, how much of my being, how much of me is accepted? I can remember saying to Randy Remington at Beaverton Foursquare, I was like, you realize that I'm an African-American man and I'm gonna bring my full self to Beaverton Foursquare. Like, I'm not gonna leave a part of me out. That's what they're gonna get. And for him, it was like, well, of course. I'm like, let me educate you. When I go to Foursquare meetings or when I go to art conferences or different places that are dominant culture and I'm a minority, I start translating, qualifying. How much, that is all a mental and an emotional drill that is unique to our travel, our experience in America.
So let me just ask this with this question then, because, and I'm going to ask you to speak it to me so no one else gets offended. Right? Right?
Okay.
Me as a white man, what can I do to help with this issue? As you just talk about, so what can we do? Asim,
That's good.
Matt, speak to me.
Part of it is what you're already doing.
Right.
That you're willing, as Sister Eunice has already said, leaning into it.
Yeah.
You're not trying to avoid it.
Right.
The other is to say, how many other white males can you bring along with you?
That's good.
This journey has got to be you talking to others, helping them understand your journey, helping them understand, and literally take yourself out of yourself and come sit in our lives. Hear what it is that we're saying.
Yeah.
You did just an amazing introduction of all of us, right? But what we're conscious of is that when we get in the car at 1:30 in the morning to drive to an emergent situation
Absolutely.
with a family,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know part of what I do is put my speed control on, even if the speed limit is 35 miles an hour, because I do not want to get stopped because my life could be in danger.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one, right?
No,
This is
nor
part of what we do.
Both of us have sons.
Exactly.
We've all had the conversation with our children growing up. Here's how you handle
There's no
a
question.
traffic stop.
No question.
You have your hands at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. You have your registration at a place where you're not reaching into the glove compartment where you can be mistaken for going to get a weapon and making an officer feel threatened. You say, yes, sir. May I retrieve my registration? That's not something, this is, if you talk to 100 African-American fathers and mothers, this is a regular conversation that we've had, not just this year because we're seeing the violence in our streets. This is historic. My father had to talk with me when I got my license, and I passed it on to my son. So.
Let me do this, and I definitely want to come back and get some questions here, but this is really important. The three of us, we have filled in our church are beautiful law enforcement officers.
Absolutely.
That we love dearly. That even in this conversation, there's a whole other fear and concern in regards to them being labeled or them being, and I could just, again, we all have those relationships. We understand it's more than the person, it's the system, it's the systemic injustice. But tell me what you would say to your friends in law enforcement, maybe to even help them so that they don't take offense. I think this is a real important part of the conversation as we get into the middle.
I mean,
you know,
unequivocally, we would say, by and large, the vast majority of our brothers that in my family, we have soldiers, we have military, we have law enforcement officers. So of course we love them. It is not to cast a broad shadow over all law enforcement officers, but it's like with every walk of life. There's always a percentage of people. There's a percentage in our church that tithes. There's a percent that doesn't. There's a percent that serves. There's percentages that doesn't. There's always going to be that. And so it's unfortunate that whenever we have this conversation, we somehow think that we're somehow casting this broad brush of disparagement against the law enforcement profession, which is not. And I don't think that was what Colin Kaepernick was trying to do. And I'm a soldier. I'm a Marine, 10 years as a veteran, as a Marine. And I didn't particularly like the form of his protest because I had friends of mine that were brought home with coffins draped with flags So that the form of it, but the substance of the protest was undeniable for me. So although I didn't agree with, man, I wish you could do something different, I could not deny when you listen to his words, not what people have said and changed the narrative, that it was about injustice, in particular police brutality, not all of them. And so we love them, we disciple them, we do life with them, but at the same time, there it has to be. And in this moment, we're seeing them police themselves. And that is the first time I've seen that ever. In 54 years, I've never seen that before. And I'm grateful for them because we need them.
Yeah.
Part of, and I want to just add on, I totally agree with Pastor Keith. The other thing I think I would say is that less me talking as much as me listening.
Yeah.
Because I truly believe that many of them need an outlet to speak. Black officers, white officers, Asian officers, Hispanic officers, every officer. We need to hear them, and then we need to channel them. And the other thing that I want each of them to do, which I challenge us to do, is to recognize that this is part of a power structure that is determined as they look at the demographics to try to assume that they can still be in power and not share power with those that don't look like them.
Yeah.
The power structure has to change. Those inside the power structure have got to learn how to share, and they've got to make this, like you have tried to make this, not just somebody else's cause, but your cause as well.
Yeah. And so, you know, the challenge that we all face is that we're extremely human, right? And unfortunately, when tension arises, our tendency, whether that's self-preservation, whether it's insecurity, whatever it might be, is we find ourselves wanting to divide or isolate. Started in the Garden of Eden, and it's happened all the way through. And it's this tension of like, how do we find ourselves in the middle? How do we die to our own perspective, opinion, pain, and get to the middle? Because this is, and Asim, I may ask you to expound on this just a little bit with the practical side of this. It's just like, it can become so toxic and so painful and so hurtful that we want to divide or we want to isolate, when really we find that we're part of this solution as the body of Christ. And so what are some practical things? You've modeled this so well, you've had to, just because of being a person of color. What are some practical things that, I mean, we just have normal, everyday people out there that are listening today. I mean, how do we find that spot? What are the practical stuff that we can do to keep from separating?
Wow, it's great. I mean, you said the word solution. I think ultimately the solution's Jesus.
Yes.
You know, and finding him here at this church as a teenager, predominantly white youth ministry at the time. It was ultimately his love and acceptance and love, and it just overshadowed everything else. Yeah. And it kind of brought to light that, love covers a multitude of sin, you know? And so on a human level, on a personal level, which could be practical too, it's just being human, being a friend, being a father. You know, even as we approached this tragedy, I had to step out of that leader pastor role and just be a follower of Jesus, be a human, be a friend, calling my friends. I remember someone asked me the day after on Wednesday, we got together, Eunice was there, we had a couple other people, we're at Peninsula Park, there's about a dozen of us, and someone said, hey, did you call a meeting? I was like, no, we were just texting and how are you doing? What can you do? I don't know, I'm hurting, can we pray? It wasn't, love doesn't have a strategy, you know? And so I think it's just loving people, being a neighbor, being a father, being a friend, and there's some definitely more practical things here at Manor House. I mean, I even texted Eunice. They've been in this conversation for many years here on even some of the concrete practical steps. But on a basic personal human level, I heard someone say once, our sanctuaries should reflect our dinner table. Yeah. I would even say even our teams as leaders at Manor House, our teams should reflect our dinner table. And but obviously that's just a service level question that has, answer that has a lot to it. But Eunice, I want to ask, I mean, you have some stuff there as well that we've been talking about this with the diversity team and I'm new to that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, again, I want to go back to that idea of like, be okay being uncomfortable.
Right.
I always tell people when we're having conversations like this or something's happening, like just even being a believer, you know in your spirit when something doesn't sit right. And when it comes to things like race, do you have the courage then to step out and take that next step and call sin, or call what's wrong, and ask for change? And so like even in conversations like this, if you feel in your spirit that like, I'm just having a hard time with this, something that like, write it down, take that before God, ask him like, Lord, I'm seeing that I'm feeling this way. I'm seeing my neighbor, and every time I walk past them, I just feel vexed in my spirit. I don't know, whatever the case may be, but like being conscientious of even like how you are in spaces when you show up to them when other people are around, and taking that to God as well too. Like you have to become aware of even how you behave in rooms that maybe you're uncomfortable in. So I think just being conscious on a basic level and taking that to God. And at the same time too, I mean, church is probably one of the few times people are sitting next to people different from themselves. For some people, that's the first time they're seeing an African-American person. That's the first time maybe they're even seeing a white person. And what safer place to bridge that gap than within the four walls of the church? You're there for a common purpose. You're there to connect. Like, why not take that extra step on the basis of Jesus and start that conversation? Invite somebody to lunch. Do something uncomfortable in that space.
I love what you say, because I've got a church planter in Brooklyn, and the whole premise of the plant was around tables. And in Brooklyn, what he wanted to do, because there's gentrification, there's longstanding churches that are now being sort of marginalized with new leaders coming in. And I think what you said with concrete action stuff, it's simple as the table where we sit down and we're doing more than sharing meals. We're sharing story, we're sharing time, we're sharing our lives together. And what if we had on our Sundays, like it was, you could even strategize it. Hey, find a person of color, find someone, invite them to lunch, somebody that doesn't look like you, somebody you don't know, and just say, we're gonna go have a meal together. Because I had a lady in my church, Marc, recently with all of this. She's awakening. She's not woke. She's awakening. Woke is that term,
Yeah,
she's awakening.
Listen, you better define that for us. Let's just go there.
Okay, woke would be somebody that is well-versed, understanding racial injustice, and are in that struggle. But for her, she's a 68-year-old white woman, lived in Portland her whole life. And she literally said, I just don't know where to start. How do I have a conversation with a black person? And I looked at her and I said, it's as simple as, hi, my name is.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like we're not a different species.
But thank God she's asking, right? I mean, that's the first step.
That is so true. And I'm grateful, because in this cultural moment, we've never seen as much movement in the white society in America that we're seeing now. But I just want to caution those that are waking right now that are white, and some of it will be on our broadcast. There's going to be a lot of African Americans who don't want to hear it, who don't want to engage with you, don't want to answer your questions, don't want you to bring your guilt to them and how you feel and teach me. We don't want to be your teachers, because they're fatigued, Marc.
Yeah.
They've been in this a long time. Hope deferred, not just hope deferred, justice deferred, humanity deferred.
Right.
And so now they're like, oh, now you want to, now George Floyd is good, so now what about Trayvon Martin? We could go down the list, and why not then? And I just, for me, all I can say in my own heart is, okay, God, now's the moment. Equip me so that I can be an agent of reconciliation now. Taking care of my own soul, because I'm hurt. I'm angry as well. And yet I know I've been called to be a teacher and an equipper to the body of Christ. But just for our audience, just know and keep going in your journey. Take the initiative to educate yourself. You don't need a black person to walk you through this. Educate yourself. There are tons of resources available. It is on Google and the internet. You can find it, because a lot of good, well-meaning people have been in this fight a long time, and they're fatigued and broken.
I would only add to that. First of all, I agree with all that. Sunday we found out there was somebody in our audience of about 200 people outside SEI here in Portland. Somebody said, what can we do? And I said, I said, so I pointed to Al Jubitz. Al said, on the internet, there's a site that says 75 things that white people can do to get over or to get involved. The other thing I would say is part of my prayer is that the hurt and pain that people have seen with the George Floyd situation, I'm not asking you to unsee that. I want you to stay with that. I want you, if you have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, I want you to keep that pain because I want you to remember that you don't want these kids to have to grow up fighting the same battle, seeing the same scenes, and nothing changes.
Let's just stop on that for just a sec. And I know we're running out of time, but it's so important. Come on, Jesus, help us to help our children. You know, what would it look like if we actually took responsibility as a greater people to try to solve this, that it doesn't have to move to the next generation? And I just think, like, what are some of the practical things? And again, I just want to close with this question as I just think about our kids. I think about my grandkids, and I just go, God, help them to not have to go through this. What are some things? What do you think? What do you guys do?
Marc,
what
listen.
should we be doing?
Wait a minute, I want to talk.
Preacher time, come on. Marc, like, I went downtown yesterday on a prayer walk with 2 other pastors.
Yeah.
And we went to the Black Lives Rally just to see, learn, lament. And here's what I saw that blew my mind. First of all, the crowd was almost 90 to 97% white. Mm-hmm. And they were weeping, crying. It did something in my soul. Because they're crying black tears now. Brenda Salter McNeil, in her book, The Roadmap to Reconciliation, talks about catalytic moments that allow somebody of the dominant culture to actually begin to feel and experience that pain. And they were. But what I saw fathers and mothers with their children. And I actually asked a young man, I was like, why'd you bring your child down? He's like, because I want my son. They took pictures and videos. And to this generational thing, he says, I want my son to know that his father did not sit idly by in this moment, that if all we could do was to come and cry with those who cried, then that was our country. Now, we're going to try to do more, but we're starting there. And I think everything for us as believers starts in the heart. Amen. Not information.
That's right.
Information alone doesn't bring transformation. And so there's something that has to pierce the heart.
All right, can I say something now?
Go ahead.
I got to say something right now on this. The issue for me is that the dominant culture learns a big lesson. Often I have heard I'm not racist. If you can accept the fact that you're privileged, then accept the fact that all of us have some racism in us.
Yes.
And don't get defensive about it, but talk about how you can overcome.
That's right.
The second thing I say, in his book, Just Mercy, Brian Stevenson says there are 4 things you got to do. 1 is be willing to be proximate. Yes. Secondly, you've got to change the narrative. Thirdly, you've got to be uncomfortable. Right. And fourthly, you have to not lose hope. And part of what I keep saying to my Caucasian friends is remember, you need to take responsibility. I've heard too many say, I wasn't in the slave thing, I didn't do that. Yeah, guess what? You represent all that. Just like every day, when I get up and you get up and others get up, we realize that we're the only black person some people have seen.
That's right.
And some people have different ideas about what we do, what we look like, which is why people stare at the numbers of the floors in the elevator rather than look at us and say hello. Yeah. That I feel like I've got a responsibility as a black man to remind you that I can disarm you because I love you. You are my brother and my sister. I don't even have to know your name. I just want you to know that I love you because I'm a child of God. And if you really are having trouble figuring out what to do, go to Psalm 121 and just say, I'll lift mine eyes to the hills. Let me quit preaching.
Okay, let's go. Here's the common denominator for all of us. We need to bring this to a close. None of us can do this without Jesus.
No.
Even as you talked about the 4 things out of just mercy, it comes down to if we don't surrender to him and ask him for the strength that we need the wisdom that we need. This is a hopeless situation. I know we're going to continue to have conversations like this, hopefully, for a long, long time. But I think it would be appropriate for us, just as we close today, to do just that. You know, my heart is that today is that you got something out of our time together. Furthermore, I hope that you're uncomfortable. I hope that you're challenged. I hope that this has caused you to do some soul searching and to ask some hard questions. I know I'm going to get 500 emails tomorrow morning.
Yes, you are.
And that's okay, because I'm willing to have the conversation. I'm willing to put this before our people, because God has a church in mind that I want to become so desperately. And we need Jesus. Listen, everything that's said today isn't perfect. It's not going to be all taken perfect, but we all have the right intent. And what we need right now is Jesus to help every one of us to be the church that he has in mind. And so I know you're probably more offended than what I'm about to do, but I'm going to ask us to grab hands. It's like anti-COVID-19. So hopefully this will be your email challenge tomorrow. But listen, I'm going to grab hands. And here's what I'm going to do. I want to represent exactly what it is that God's trying to do. The Bible says this. It says the world will know that we're his disciples. By what? By the way we love one another. And so, Jesus, we thank you for this moment to have this difficult and necessary conversation. And Lord, no matter how uncomfortable any of us are, regardless of how we view this situation, Lord, can we fall to our knees and can we simply ask you to reveal to us your heart? God, you love all people. You created all people in your likeness, in your image, equal in value. God, let us honor, let us respect, let us love. God, we're praying today that you would use this moment, God, as I just even think of every home. Lord, I think of every family, even those with kids right now. Lord, help us not to resist, but to respond. Help us to lean in and not pull back. God, would you help us as Manna House family to model to the world what it means to be a diverse, unified church, Lord, where we all love one another. God, I thank you for my friends. God, I pray your blessing on them. Lord, we're just praying today for our world, for our city. God, we're praying for unity. We're praying for healing. God, we pray that you would use this to spark one of the greatest revivals of restoration and reconciliation and people turning to you. God, we're willing to be on the journey, church for the journey. We're willing to take the risk. We ask these things today. In the mighty name of Jesus, we pray. Amen, amen, amen. Wow. Thank you, guys. Love you so much. Thank you so much, church family, for being you. I love you. We're praying. And I just want to let you know that in the coming weeks, we're actually going to do some webinars. We're going to have some further conversations. And if you just go to mannahouse.church/diversity, there'll be some information where over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I know you'll be a part of those conversations. We'd love to invite you to be a part of that. We've also going to put a whole bunch of resources. This would be a great opportunity to read a few books, listen to a few podcasts, watch a couple conversations that take place. We stole a lot of it off your website, Pastor Keith. You got some good stuff out there. And so we're gonna do that. But I just want to encourage you, listen, do something. Come on, let's do something. Let's be the church. God bless you. I love you so much. Thank you for letting me be vulnerable. Thank you for being a part of this great church. We're believing for great things for your life. God bless you. Have a great week.